Hello, everyone. Welcome to DIME's launch webinar for the Building the Business Case for Digital Endpoints project. My name is Nicole Medina, and I'm a project manager here at DIME. I've been a part of the team working on this project over the past several months, and we're really looking forward to sharing the resources that we've built with you all. Today, we will hear opening remarks from DIME's CEO, Jennifer Goldsack. The program director on this project, Victoria Bangieva, will provide an overview of the resources, and we will have 3 panel discussions featuring members of the project team. Before we get started, just a few quick reminders. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterward. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, and our panelists will answer them as they're able. And finally, we ask that participants do not transcribe the webinar. If you're not familiar with DIME, we are a global nonprofit that brings together stakeholders to tackle the biggest challenges in digital medicine. Our mission is to advance the safe, effective, and equitable use of digital approaches to redefine healthcare and improve lives, working towards better health powered by digital innovation. Now, I would like to welcome DIME's CEO, Jennifer Goldsack, to give our opening remarks.
Fantastic, Nicole. Thank you so much, and congratulations to you and all of our partners on this project team for the phenomenal and particularly important resources that we're launching today. It was interesting in preparing for this discussion today. I was reflecting on what a different environment we find ourselves in now compared to when we actually initiated work on this project. So when we started work on this project in the fall of last year, the value proposition, the excitement around the use of digital endpoints in developing new medical products was incredibly high. We had guidance that was final on decentralized clinical trials and on the use of digital health technologies for remote data acquisition in medical product development. By data that we tracked in our own endpoints library, we could see an ongoing embrace of these measures as critical drug development tools. We could look at the maturity of the technologies and the solutions, whether operationally or the measurement tool and the measurement itself. And we were incredibly excited about the ability of this work to stand on the shoulders of the partnership that we initiated with Tufts, where we were able to demonstrate for the first time enormous ROI associated with the use of digital endpoints in medical product development. All of these opportunities, all of these sort of statements remain true, but we do find ourselves in a very different environment today. We see publicly funded drug discovery potentially being wiped off the table. We see across our life sciences ecosystem a sort of downshift in the level of investment in innovation. We see sweeping layoffs. We see the curtailment of pioneering, innovative, brilliant digital teams. And yet we do this across a backdrop of potentially decreasing revenues in sort of molecule development in the pharmaceutical sector. And if I think about how on earth we are going to be able to continue effective R&D that meets the needs of the patients that we are here to serve, I don't know how we make forward progress without embracing digital approaches. I don't know how we move away from a future where we are relentlessly focused on the aspects of a disease that make the greatest difference or are most significant to patients. I don't know how we move forward unless we can improve the efficiency and the timelines with which we are developing new medical products so that the economics can continue to work for every single patient who needs a new treatment, who needs a cure, who is waiting for us to deliver. I don't know how we make forward progress unless we drive towards more decentralized approaches. I don't know how we make more progress unless we can rely on high resolution, trustworthy measures. As I said, we already started this work where we could quantify the value of these measures, where we had regulatory certainty from final guidances, where we have brilliant and mature technologies. And yet what we've created today, I think, is actually more important in the current environment. We've stood on the shoulders of that initial work with Tufts. And what we've developed is an open access sort of toolkit that will allow anyone, even in the absence of an internal digital team, to be able to come to these resources and quantify the value and the ROI of making an upfront and initial investment in the use of digital endpoints. This is absolutely essential in our environment right now. We have to be able to point to short-term ROI as we make this investments. That is what our industry is demanding in these uncertain terms. And we have to be able to quantify the value of these investments over time at the organizational level and at the market level if we are going to continue to persist with the development of new medical products. And speaking as a patient, this is particularly important. Since we launched this project, I was also diagnosed with late-stage cancer. I've spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I've spent far too much time in a doctor's office. And I can't imagine what my situation would be if there wasn't a proven effective protocol for treating my condition. Now, it's pretty rough, and if there are a way to do this with maintaining a little bit more hair and, you know, without some of the side effects that I'm dealing with, that would be great. But really thinking about the value of these endpoints to patients, the ability to take clinical trials outside of the walls of the clinic, to create study schedules that don't rely upon long, lengthy, burdensome trips to a clinic. And we can couple that with proven ROI that our industry is demanding. This is an incredibly exciting time against a backdrop of uncertainty. And what I'm so proud that we have done with our partners, and again, thank you to all of you for coming to the table and then staying at the table with a dogged determination to create these open access resources, is we've generated mechanisms by which anyone can come to the table and say, we can quantify the value of this investment. We can quantify the value of this innovation. We will find a way to continue to carry this forward, and we will do that, perhaps even as we lose colleagues, to drive this forward. I'm very excited about what this can do, not just for the development of new therapies and the patients that we're here to serve, but to generate proof points for ongoing investment into innovation. So as we dive into our discussions today, I really see these resources as an important opportunity, not just a glimmer of hope, but as a ray of sunshine in what is a particularly challenging time for innovation. This is going to be the way that we drive forward and we maintain a rapid pace of bringing new treatments, new cures to market, even under tougher and more uncertain times. So Victoria, congratulations to you and the team. To our partners, thank you so much for coming to the table to co-create these resources. I'm excited for the conversations you'll hear today when you get educated on how these tools and resources can help you, and further examples of how they're already being put into practice and how this will allow us to persist in developing new disease-modifying treatments and cures for the patients who need us to stay the course and continue to drive forward relentlessly with innovation. Victoria, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jen, for your powerful words and for teeing us up so nicely for the rest of this conversation today. I want to introduce myself. My name is Victoria Bengieva, and I'm a program director here at the Digital Medicine Society. I'm excited to be here today with all of you to share the launch of our Building the Business Case for Digital Endpoints project and resources. And before we dive into our panel discussions and hear from our esteemed speakers who are all partners in this important work, I'd like to provide an overview of the project and resources that we developed. The goal of this project was to develop the resources that would enable teams within pharma companies and DHT developers and others to make the business case for incorporating digital endpoints by demonstrating their value and the financial return or return on investment, or the ROI. As John mentioned, digital endpoints provide an opportunity to enhance patient centricity, improve trial efficiency, and generate more meaningful data. The potential impact on clinical research is profound, with the ability to not only accelerate the development of novel therapeutics, but also to refine the personalized treatment approaches. As John mentioned, the industry has already made significant strides in adopting digital endpoints, with over 300 digital endpoints cataloged in DIME's library of digital endpoints since 2019. And yet there are still barriers. to their widespread adoption, one of which is the lack of robust data on financial ROI. To address this gap, DIME, in collaboration with Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development and several other pharma and biotech industry leaders, published a paper last year that demonstrated significant ROI when digital endpoints are incorporated in the trial. And I'm excited to share that actually findings from that paper served as the inspiration for this project. To drive adoption, we need financial frameworks that clearly outline cost savings, risk mitigation, accelerated decision-making, and enhanced data quality. This project set out to do exactly that through a pre-competitive collaboration with 40 organizations across pharmaceutical, digital health technology, academic, and regulatory sectors. I would like to just first take a moment to thank all of our project partners for your contributions, your expertise in this important work. And now I'll briefly review the resources that we launched today, which are all available on our project page on DIME's website. The resources can be accessed through the project's page, the homepage on the website, or this navigation bar up here, which is what I will use as I review them. The first resource is the value framework, the Digital Endpoints Value Framework, that identifies the value across each phase of a clinical trial. Next, we included a catalog of 10 case studies that provide real-world examples of the value that digital endpoints have delivered in various clinical trials. Another resource that we are very proud of is the Digital Endpoints ROI Calculator. The ROI Calculator allows you to estimate the ROI of including digital endpoints in a clinical trial by selecting the product-specific scenario and relying on the pre-populated industry averages that are included in the calculator. You can estimate the ROI. Of course, all of the pre-populated industry averages can be updated with your own organization's data if it is available. And lastly, the business case template allows you to build a compelling case for including digital endpoints, and by making the business case strategic and data informed. I invite you to review these resources as you are working on increasing the adoption and making the business case for digital endpoints. And with that, I'm excited to kick off our first panel discussion on understanding the value of digital endpoints and barriers in their adoption. I'd like to introduce our panel speakers: Amy De Gaetano, doctoral student at Eastern Virginia Medical School; David Sunderman-Oft, founder and CEO of Modality AI; and Karen Canisius, CEO of SUS Plus. Thank you all for joining us today. It is a pleasure speaking with you here today. And to kick us off, let's start with, where do digital endpoints provide the most value in clinical trials? And how does this differ across trial phases? David, would you like to kick us off there?
Yeah, very happy to give you some insight on the specific question, specifically on the value. You mentioned the value framework that depends on the specific phases of drug development. Let's look into digital endpoints as predominantly being used for measuring of efficacy of therapeutic interventions. They may be also used for safety monitoring, but efficacy is, I think, where the significant focus lies today. That does depend certainly on the phase of development. So in early stage trials, say in phase 1b studies, where you may look for the very first time into whether there's certain trends that are emerging, digital endpoints can play a good role in identifying in which area is a change being seen in, for example, in the progression of the disease or in any response that the treatment is already providing, really informing what you should do in the second stage of drug development, for example, in the phase 2 study that is following after. In phase 2 studies, we have seen digital endpoints predominantly being used for efficacy measurement, in addition, of course, to the more standardized primary and secondary endpoints that are being used today, more traditional things like, for example, scales in the neurology and others. That is also to inform you, what is happening next. If you don't see any signal, for example, in your primary and secondary endpoints, and you don't see any signal in the variety of digital measures that you deploy, then you may decide potentially not to continue forward with that program, which is an important decision to make. If, however, you see trends that are indicating that both digital measures as well as some of the other endpoints show a signal, then you may want to move into the phase 3 study. And in later stage studies like phase 3, digital endpoints may provide you with materials that can be used as supportive evidence in regulatory decision making, which we have seen as well. So depending on the stage, different types of value, but very strong value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, David, one of the things I'd love to point out that you talked about, and Jennifer did as well, is that patient satisfaction. And she talked about being able to have access to that. So I would absolutely add on to what you just said about that. And I feel like these digital endpoints, they optimize efficiency, as you just said, in early trials, but also reinforce that regulatory real world evidence in the late stage trials as well. So very well put.
Mm-hmm. And from your experiences, what would you say are some of the biggest hurdles preventing broader adoption of digital endpoints in pharma and biotech today?
Well, there are multiple hurdles. If we wouldn't need to have such a wonderful initiative as this if we were seeing the value that we as partners see in utilizing digital endpoints. And those hurdles are varied and quite typical across our industry in general. So I'm actually quite, I guess, optimistic with all of the challenges that Jennifer was talking about as well. It's forcing us to find a better way, a different way to do things. So I'm, although frustrated with some of the hurdles we have, also see this as an opportunity for us as an industry to actually evolve and embrace digital endpoints. And I'm ecstatic that we were a partner to support, as well as to focus on ensuring that smaller biotech and pharma also have the availability and understanding that these tools are there. So some of the things that we see are what I would say is quite standard. We as an industry, people who know me will say that they've heard me say we are sometimes slower than frozen molasses. We just have a very slow adoption of innovation and change, right? So if we look at the Tufts research, it's 5.8 years to actually adopt a digital approach, even after we've identified what is the problem and what we're going to do about it. We just generally are not so quick. We have internal buy-in challenges within pharma. That's for the sponsors in pharma and biotech I work with, less challenging. There's not big teams to deal with, but there is internal buy-in between stakeholders, investors, and those companies. It's difficult to convince everyone that this is the right thing to do. We are not risk averse as an industry, or we would not be trying to find medicines for patients. But in this type of thing, we are risk averse. And we don't, this awful expression of we don't get fired by choosing a big tech vendor, or we don't get fired by doing the standard process, is actually a hurdle to change, I believe. Yeah. Secondly, we have, for many, what I'm hearing is really overwhelming regulatory and tech changes. It's evolving so quickly that we're hearing lots of, and we're seeing there's a lot of overwhelmness with the amount of change and how to keep up and what should I know. And that, let's say, feeds into the risk aversion, right? If you don't quite understand everything that's going on, you're less likely to jump. We see increased guidance with the EU AI Act. We see questioning on data integrity, computerized systems. What does that mean? We are asking many more questions about to our vendor partners. How is this system put together? Have you validated it? And the answer to that a lot of times is probably not in the way we should have, and that's difficult for us to say. So this creates again bigger hurdles. That's why I'm glad we're almost forced to jump those hurdles. With regulatory clarity and precedent, digital endpoints still are seen as more novel. Not that I believe that that's completely true, but they are seen that way. And in an industry where we tend to be more conservative, that's difficult if still seen as novel. It's something that I do think is an actual concern, and something we as an industry should be acting upon is really validation concerns. This is a broader issue, a lack of understanding of what does it mean, and a lack of understanding of how we should be checking. But many digital measures are not fully validated yet, which is good that it's now becoming a requirement, or is a requirement. But even with all of those hurdles, I still believe that savvy teams, and we are very much in the, shall we say, on the crusade together with everyone here in our partner group, that people and teams will be able to properly to assess their risk versus value. And that's why utilizing the tools that were developed that you saw, so utilizing the value framework, actually utilizing the ROI calculator, that will allow teams to make that decision, and Workstatics have been part of it.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. You started to discuss some of the ways in which we can start to address some of these barriers. And I'm curious, if an organization is just beginning to explore digital endpoints, what are some of the first key steps that they should consider or ensure that they are building a strong foundation for adoption?
For me, I guess I would kind of boil that down to four major points. But the first being, make sure that your digital endpoint has a purpose. Don't just choose one because it's either trending or it's something that is an initiative from the company that you want to be involved. So I guess starting with that strategic pilot. So identifying a high impact use case that aligns with the clinical goals. So something, example is remote monitoring for a neurodegenerative disease, or a digital biomarker for a movement disorder. So have a strategic place to put that. I would suggest as number one. And I definitely encourage my counterparts to jump in as well, DSO and Kieran. The second I would say is engage early with regulatory bodies. So as Kieran just put the hurdles out there, that not all these different digital endpoints have been validated. So just make sure you work with them, the regulatory bodies, to ensure and establish a validation framework and make sure that this is something that works for you and your product and your company and the patients. And I guess the third would be ensure cross-functional buy-in, because you need to educate key stakeholders, whether it's clinical or regulatory, even IT, commercial teams, on the benefits, the implementation of those digital endpoints. And if you're collaborating with a CRO or other technology provider who have experience in digital marker integration, that's also key. We want this to be as seamless and easy as possible. The fourth for me would really be to build scalable and interoperative data infrastructure. So meaning invest in a platform that is seamless for data collection. At the end of the day, your data quality is what is going to determine how well you did. So really enable a seamless data collection, analysis, integration with existing clinical trial management systems, or CTMS, but also ensure data security. That is probably one of the number one things all of us on this call hear a lot about, is ensure that the security and compliance with global regulations. We do have HIPAA here in the US, GDPR compliance overseas. So for me, those would be the biggest four, but I'd love to also hear from my counterparts as well on their thoughts.
I completely agree with all of those points. I would add as well is that even prior to, I think you mentioned starting at defining the use case, how do you want to do this, but almost taking one step earlier. So this is how we tend to work as the teams we're assessing this with, is to say, what problem can we solve? Or what efficiency do we need to find? Or which subjective endpoint can we tighten? Or how do we supplement the wearable data? And when we're thinking about phase 2A or 2B studies, we actually think about what could we be using for phase 3, because we potentially could validate right now. So that one step before, almost like step 0, is investigating what is the problem we're trying to solve, and then looking at what can we find that will solve that exact problem. Similar to risk-based management, everything by design, first looking at what's the problem. That would be, it helps to not get lost. There's so much, and there's so much to do at that point. Is that would be a step I would add, but then follow exactly what Amy just said.
And just a final addition to this, also step 0, or maybe step -1 almost.
Oh no, look at us.
Is that, and we have a lot of conversation with sponsors about this, is really the return on investment. And that's one of the things that, of course, is one of the resources that's provided here as well. Because you're not only speaking to the curious scientists who like all this stuff and want to know more about their drug and so on, but you're also talking about people who make financial decisions in these organizations. And if you can clearly show that there is a significant return, that you will increase the chances of success of a study, that you reduce the cost that the study produces, then actually you have also those people on your side. And that together can push this forward.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts there. And David, you actually teed us off perfectly to our next panel discussion, which is going to focus on making that financial case and calculating the ROI. And I'm excited to introduce and pass it over to Sarah Valentine, DIME's Partnership Lead for Life Sciences, who will moderate this discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victoria. And I'm excited to not be the only one in this discussion today. I'm joined by 3 excellent panelists: Jeff Abraham, who's a partner at Health Advances, Martha O'Neill, VP at Health Advances, and Joe DeMasi, who is the Director of Economic Analysis at the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development at Tufts University. So couldn't ask for a better panel here. I'd love to kick us off with Joe, actually. As we've discussed here, a lot of this project and the ROI calculator in particular was really informed and inspired by some of the pivotal work that you and I did together on our previous manuscript. Can you walk us through how was that model created?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Sarah. We were approached by DIME and a number of experts in industry about developing a financial model that would address the question of whether there was an economic rationale for employing digital measures in clinical trials. It was unclear initially how best to do that, but DIME has a wonderful resource, its Library of Digital Endpoints. And we saw that we could marry that resource with information contained in clinicaltrials.gov. So we downloaded the clinicaltrials.gov database with information on nearly 500,000 trials, but pared it down to several thousand so that we could make comparisons for trials with the same indication and phase. We were able to then estimate benefits for the operational characteristics of trials that use digital endpoints relative to similar trials without digital endpoints. We also surveyed developers of digital technologies and sponsors that use those technologies in clinical development to estimate the incremental costs from using digital measures in clinical trials. We could then embed that information in a value framework to assess the net financial value from using digital technologies to obtain digital endpoint outcomes. And specifically, we used as an expected net present value framework, which I have used in a number of other studies, to evaluate the net financial gain from implementing some change in the clinical trial process.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you providing that background here. Next, I'd love to go to you, Martha. You've done a tremendous amount of work along with Jeff to really democratize the model itself and make it accessible to folks across the field through the ROI calculator. Now, this calculator was designed to help organizations make more data-driven decisions. Can you expand upon who was the calculator designed for and what types of financial and strategic insights that users of the calculator can expect to gain?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. And The calculator uses the methodology and work from Joe and the team at Tufts and broader team that worked on that initiative, and translates it into, as you were saying, an open access resource that was designed with a broad audience in mind. And this includes both trial sponsors and digital health technology companies. For example, trial sponsors can use the model to estimate the financial impact of incorporating digital endpoints in their own development programs. And digital health technology companies can use it to highlight the value of their product to potential partners. The flexibility and user interface of the calculator is approachable to both those who are new to the space and exploring digital endpoints for the first time, as well as those who are farther along in the adoption curve and really looking to test specific scenarios around the program that they're working on. And in terms of the types of insights users can expect to gain, we've talked about from a financial perspective, it demonstrates the return on investment of incorporating digital endpoints into the program. It's pre-populated with we're calling industry average inputs, many drawn from the paper and work that has already been done, but allows users to dynamically change and customize all of these for their own specific use case. For example, changing the estimated cost of implementing digital endpoints into the trial, or changing the estimates around the cost and length of the trial for their particular case. And from a strategic perspective, the tool can be used in concert with all of the other resources that we're talking about today. I think it's one of the really exciting things to see is, for example, users can now quickly quantify the financial impact of the various drivers identified in the value framework. You can see, for example, how the shorter trial duration or smaller study size from things like having continuous objective data capture can lead to that positive return on investment, and then take the output from the calculator and use it as part of the business case that's being developed for demonstrating and advocating for use of digital endpoints.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And now, Jeff, I'll go to you. I know you're working with organizations that are making these decisions day in and day out. I'd be curious if you could share, are there any best practices that you'd recommend for how teams should use the calculator in order to make a case for investment?
Yeah, I really look at the calculator as a way to really broaden the reach of digital measures. And I think that in order to do so, we heard earlier from David and Amy and Kieran, we heard some great things that need to be in place in order for you to have a conversation about digital measures and implement them within your organization. And it isn't just a science discussion, right? I think we inherently know that the science part is what we believe in, the impact on efficacy, measuring efficacy, safety, patient monitoring, screening, all those benefits I think we believe are there. And I think intuitively we believe the impact that Martha mentioned on trial size, trial length, even potentially peak sales. I think part of what I would say, and I think it was Kieran that said this, is you need to have a collaborative effort. So I think part of this is reaching out to others within your organization to bring them into the model, because the model has a lot of assumptions in it and they're great, but I think the more you can specify it to your organization, the better. So the more you reach out to other people within your organization to collect inputs that are specific, I think you'll have all the better outcome and discussion. And again, we're not saying that like this is pure play economic discussion. There's obviously a ton of other benefits, but I think that economics is an important part of this discussion that needs to be there. And the more people that are involved, I think the better. So I really see this as a tool to not only explore the economic impact, but also as a way to kind of bring organizational collaboration around digital measures as well.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little bit off script here, as I know we've got a little bit of time left for our panel in particular. But I'd be curious, you talked about bringing others around the table in order to really discuss cross-functionally what the economics of trial implementation or digital endpoint implementation look like for a particular trial or a study. I'd be curious kind of how you would frame the ROI calculator to some of those, say, for example, I'm in clinical operations or I'm in data management or something like that. How would you think about framing the calculator and framing kind of the benefits and really facilitating going into that discussion? Any recommendations? Anyone can take it.
Yeah, okay, I can. So, I think as you're doing this, I think one, if I was using the calculator, I would make the user guide very accessible. I think with models, there's a challenge where it's right for everyone and it's wrong for everyone at the same time, because a model is specific to no one and specific to everyone. So I think as you're working with, and by the way, I think this goes beyond even clinical and finance. You could even talk about commercial at certain points, because you're talking about peak sales, COGS, things like that. So there's a lot of inputs here and a lot of opportunity to engage with other members to, I think, not only educate them again about the economic impact, but about the actual impact on patient experience, trial outputs, and success of trials. So I think I would start off with, I love the framework. I love having David, Amy, and Kieran's conversation actually ahead of time. I would go in with that conversation first and be like, hey, here's the reason why we're looking at this. Here's why we think it's a good idea. Oh, and on top of that, we have this tool that we can utilize that will actually help us not only express, again, the clinical benefits or the benefits to the trial, but the economic benefits to the organization as well, and potentially the earning potential of the product itself. So I think it's kind of making a more holistic value proposition discussion and using the tool as a part of that.
Appreciate that. And then a last question from me. Maybe just a couple of quick thoughts from each of the panelists. I'm curious where you see us going from here. And again, anyone can kick us off here.
I can jump in first. I think where we go from here, I think, as Jeff was saying, I think the tool is a great discussion starter and a great tool to use to facilitate discussions across organizations on all of the different benefits of digital endpoints in clinical development, including the economic piece. And I think the hope, kind of as we were developing the tool, is also that there'll be more data available in the future, more potential benefits that we can quantify. And the tool is built to be very flexible, as Jeff was talking about. He was alluding to potentially impacts on things like peak sales. And as there's actual data to support that, there's the flexibility in the tool to change those inputs and see what impact that could have on the return on investment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're alone, and I think there's 100+ people on this call that would agree that we're incredibly bullish on the impact digital measures will have on clinical trials, and quite frankly beyond that as well. So I think to Martha's point, this is the start, and this is a great start. I think Joe's work with DIME and other organizations to begin this was really the beginning of kind of quantifying this. But again, like, it just gets better and easier from here. And if you look at the therapeutic areas we target in the beginning, it's not because there aren't benefits in additional clinical areas. We're just going to prove those out over time. So the model will get better every year. We'd like to update it every year and help with that. And so that also requires the community to support this model and utilize it and help us make it better in the future. So like I said, I think this is more than a first step, but a really great beginning to what I see as a real already beginning sea change in how we do clinical trials.
And I agree with everything that's been said. And I think it's a very exciting time now, because I think the tool, the calculator, will stimulate such interest that we will, as been discussed, we will be gathering more and more information and refining the tool and expanding it, to many therapeutic areas, which we haven't been able to do to this point, but I expect we will in the near future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again to all three panelists. Really appreciate your insights, your wisdom here, and all of your contributions throughout the project. I know we've been thrilled to collaborate with you. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Victoria.
Thank you all for that very insightful discussion, and Sarah. Well, this brings us to our third and final panel discussion that will focus on how organizations can use these resources that we launched today and the lessons that we learned as a project team while developing them. I'm excited to introduce our speakers for this panel. Elena Ismailova, Chief Scientific Officer at Connexa Health. Libby Flodine, Biostatistician and Head of Endpoints at Evanova. Marissa Dockendorf, Executive Director and Head of Digital Clinical Measures at Merck. And last but not least, Michelle Krothamel, Head of Digital Science at AbbVie. Thank you all for joining us for this final panel. And to start, I'd love to hear on when we as a project team were developing these resources, what key challenges in digital endpoint adoption were you aiming to address in making the business case? And how would you say, now that we have these tools, how do they help solve those questions?
I can start. Thank you for having me, Victoria. So certainly having some understanding of ROI is key in deciding on how to allocate resources. In my shoes, we're lucky enough to work across many different disease areas, but always there are resource decisions to be made, right? So some advantages of novel digital endpoints might become apparent, sometimes we have increased precision, right? So we can think about what that benefit is, right, of a more precise endpoint, right? But how this further can be quantified into financial benefit is often less clear, for example. So now we have this tool and we can understand where we expect to see efficiencies and weigh this with our overall strategy and for alignment ultimately. Right? It's particularly useful to see not just the financial benefits, but how these novel digital endpoints can actually benefit patients by bringing effective drugs to the market earlier.
Thank you, Libby.
So I will add to this that one of the challenges of the field that our knowledge is fragmented. We are familiar with certain use cases, certain applications, certain benefits, but the value of this project to bring it all knowledge and experience together. We talked earlier today, and Kieran said that these measures are perceived as new. They're not new, they're newer, maybe than some others that have been used in the field, and they have proof of concept behind them. Technical validation, it's another matter, and DIME has plenty of resources on this topic. But again, the wealth of this project that we brought our knowledge together and the amount of evidence is very impressive.
Yeah, I would like to build on what Alina just said. I think that it can be quite challenging to get buy-in internally to pursue development and use of digital endpoints. I think Jen did a really great job at the beginning of this webinar talking about some of the challenges that our industry is facing. And digital endpoints can actually help address some of those challenges, but it takes a long time to get there. And so I think that the value of this project was bringing together various stakeholders from across companies, sharing their knowledge, as Alina just mentioned, and providing some tools to help articulate the value. And importantly, I think the case studies that were also developed as resources from this project are also really important, because along the way, I think there's been a lot of progress around demonstrating the value or potential value of digital endpoints. And I think sharing those along the way is actually really critical. And so I think that's really one of the great resources that was also developed as part of this project.
Yeah, and echo everything that all the panelists already said. So I would say the bottom line is we have to understand, ultimately this is an investment for the study team. And when we wanted to make a business case, and I initially reached out to Jen, I said, we really need to build this business case framework for the industry because everybody struggles. I hear different stage of struggling. And so I think having now this framework built and also the ROI calculator is really tremendously helpful, because I don't see that that type of a push in the eCOA space or biomarker space, but that's been going on for a long time, right? And now with this AI effort coming in, every company having AI strategies. So where does digital endpoint impact going to stand compared to all the other investment that's pulling all different directions from the leadership? So when we think about how we're going to make a business case, we have to really put ourselves in these decision makers' shoes, right? To think about what does this data going to do for the drug development program? What impact it's going to do? Is it going to help with the early decision making or support label claim and really help this product to be differentiated on the competitive market, right? So we have to really get those sort of value proposition clear upfront. Then I feel like the ROI calculator is icing on the cake. It really make it much easier for these folks to be able to make an easier decision. Plus, we don't usually have to build a large cohort because our sample size is a lot smaller, and then we can actually see a much greater objective outcome result. So I'm really, really very pleased. All the concerns I initially raised to Jen has been addressed by this project. So really applaud for everybody's wonderful effort working together to accomplish this.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts there. And as we're thinking about organizations using these resources, what would you say are some key takeaways that you hope organizations walk away with as they engage with them? And how can these resources contribute to the broader adoption of digital endpoints?
I will take on this one because I worked in both biopharma sectors and technology sectors, and I feel entitled to speaking on behalf of both. As Marissa very well described about the buy-in on the pharma side and getting to the decision-making point, I remember in the days when we tried to do any new technology, not just digital, any new technology into a clinical study protocol, it was a lengthy road. We wanted to be thorough and we wanted to assess multiple aspects, what the adoption would entail, but sometimes we would get to the point that it was counterproductive and we would spend more time that is really needed. With these resources, template, the ROI calculator, it makes the process so much easier. Looking in my old days, like early 2000s, we were talking about biomarker assays. I wish we had these resources. We would save so many FTE hours. Now I'm going to speak on behalf of the technology industry and again emphasize that these resources bring us on the same page. It's easier to start talking because we know the use cases. We know what ROI calculator means. We know how the industry uses this. It makes the process of putting digital into the study protocol so much more efficient. The other topic that was touched upon compared to other measures. Yes, digital measures do not have the same degree of acceptance as biomarkers or clinical outcome assessment. It's just the results because they have not been used for as long, because behind other measures, we have decades of work and adoption process, but this is an accelerator for the adoption process that organizations now can look at and figure out where to use them for the benefit of their organization. And it also reduces trial and error process. Let's put digital measures into a specific study protocol and figure out how it works. The road has been paved.
Thank you, Elena.
Yeah, and I can add on to that. I agree with everything that Elena said. And, really, we want to put patients first, right? And I think everyone on this call agrees that we firmly believe that novel digital endpoints can benefit patients in a variety of ways, such as doing a better job measuring what's important, right? And this is piggybacking on what Jen said to start this whole webinar off, right? But at the end of the day, we can support these efforts by also demonstrating the financial risks and benefits to help with this decision making. And this tool is a amazing part to help us do that.
Thank you. We're talking a lot here today about increasing adoption and how these resources can be helpful. And to just dig in a little bit more, I'm wondering specifically what internal functions within a pharma or a biotech company would you say we need to specifically engage in to successfully build a business case for digital endpoints?
Well, so I can start. Yeah, well, I think it really does depend on the why. Start with the why. Why are you wanting to include a digital endpoint in your program? And then some of the stakeholders that you engage are dependent on that why, but certainly clinical development would be one. Potentially your value and implementation teams, especially if you're thinking about a label claim or something along those lines. There's also others that also need to be involved, like clinical trial operations, statistics, IT, data management. Those are some of the other functional areas that need to be included, but I would say clinical development teams and value and implementation teams would be key ones.
Yeah, and I can add on to one Marisa just shared. I think if you are actually planning for regulatory rank endpoint progression, your regulatory team partnership is really critical. I can share that one use case that we have participated and share with a DIME project is a rainbow vitiligo program that requires 5 different, from the beginning to the end, 5 different regulatory meetings, right? From FDA and also EMA in order to get it to acceptance of rank endpoint. So I think it's not just once you inform them, it's actually going back, show them the result, and then they will give you really great feedback, and you continue to develop and validate it along your drug development program on the side, and then go back again. And so I really think that is quite critical, and people don't plan for it. And so that's why the timeline can actually drag on very, very long, typically 5 to 7 years. And we were able to actually get it done less than 3 years. So I think having that kind of tight partnership with your regulatory department is really critical. Another one I would also emphasize is that sometimes there's a complementary nature when you're trying to validate these measurements. So what we found is building very good partnership with the HOR department when they bring in the ECOA, because when you initially have to clinically validate these measurements, you have to correlate against those traditional endpoint and to demonstrate your clinical validity, right? And so another one is the precision medicine department or translational medicine, whatever the company can call it. So the biomarker group, if they also have the early kind of signal finding, that would be also nice to correlate as well. So I think building these kind of complementary evidence team and really trusting each other is not in competition, but actually is working together as a team sport to support the asset development. I think those type of partnership is really critical. And I don't know if most companies also have a strong, I would say, the procurement department to help you qualify these digital vendors ahead of time, because I think timeline is really essential for all the drug development program. So working ahead with these kind of department to qualify your technology early, and so it doesn't impact your study timeline, is also quite essential. So I know those are kind of additional department that I would recommend to consider as well.
Excellent. Thank you all for your thoughts. And to wrap us up in this conversation, I can't help but ask a looking forward kind of question. So looking ahead, what would you say success would look like in terms of scaling the use of digital endpoints in clinical trials, let's say over the next 3 to 5 years? And again, how can these resources help contribute to that success?
Yeah, I can start here. So, if we can continually demonstrate sound financial forecasting using this tool, then we can have the confidence for decision making to support this type of novel endpoint development, right? And like any innovative technology, refining and updating, leveraging new evidence can only make the tools stronger, right? I think Jeff was speaking to this earlier. And so it's the collaboration, right, that allows for the sharing of information, sharing of successes. It's this collaboration coming together to continually to improve and I should say refine and think about how the sharing of information can better help our forecasting and understanding of the ROI with novel endpoint development.
Yeah, I would. Oh, go ahead, Alina.
From my point of view, I would like to see digital measures and digital endpoints on as equal partners in the drug development toolbox, that the teams just sit and pick and choose what they need. And it's not a perception of something new, difficult. It's just part of the course.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, more evidence generation over the next 3 to 5 years, more validation of these digital endpoints, more use cases where digital endpoints have provided value to drug development programs, and it's not treated as separate. It's just an integrated part of the drug development strategy. I think that's where it would be great to see it evolve to.
Yeah. And also echo that as well. I would further wanted to see like eventually maybe the head-to-head trials. Digital endpoint is actually what will be compared. Maybe payer should demand some of these real outcome measure coming out of DHT, right? And so I think in the next 3 to 5 years, if we don't hear the word pilot anymore, this is a really part of the normal business, and all the medical directors and all just thinking about digital endpoint as a normal endpoint, right? And so I think that's from our perspective, and you definitely wanted to see more people capable of operating this in a very smooth fashion. And I would also like to see more approval from regulator perspective, right? So they publish these cases in EMA website, for the first digital endpoint qualification, but we would love to see more drug approval actually based on digital endpoint as primary endpoint. And so I would love to really see that in the next 3 to 5 years. And from the ecosystem, from the, I would say, in order for this to be able to scale and excel, we really need a very healthy ecosystem with the DHT vendors continue to develop and validate and have these tools available for pharma sponsors to adopt. So I think healthy partnership with a pharma and really develop this ahead of time. So it's not like always kind of afterthought. So I think all those can change, and that will be a really a wonderful future for digital endpoint. So, and once again, I can't thank DIME enough for pulling together all those wonderful use cases. I looked at the tool this morning, and I'm really glad that so many pharma are already using this and openly share these use cases. And I really look forward to actually more adoption of digital endpoint in the industry. So thank you for your effort.
Thank you so much, Michelle, with those powerful closing remarks. And thank you for all of your contributions and your wonderful insights here on this panel. So with that, I'm going to close out our webinar. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for sharing your insights and experiences with the audience today. I'd also like to on a final note to extend again my deepest gratitude to our entire project team for your leadership and dedication to this work. It has been a pleasure and my honor to collaborate with all of you. I invite everyone to review our project resources by visiting our project page on DIME's website. And lastly, I'd like to close out with some exciting upcoming DIME projects. First is our Assessing Mental Health Treatment Effects project. You can find more information through the link provided there. And next is our driving market access for diabetes management. And lastly, the aging in place of choice with connected health technologies. Please feel free to visit these project pages to learn more about these projects and join us in continuing to develop these important open access resources for the industry. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye.